Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the new co-director of the Whitmore Foundation, Sarah Elizabeth Morrison. The spotlight hit me like a physical force. 500 faces turned toward the stage, champagne glasses suspended mid-sip, conversations dying into expectant silence. My hands found the microphone, steady despite the earthquake in my chest. 2 years ago, I began, my voice carrying across the Denver Convention Center. My own family told a room full of people that I was a lesson they had to learn the hard way. Tonight, I want to tell you about the lesson I learned from them. In the third row, I spotted her. Lindsay Morrison Crawford, my sister, her mouth slightly open in recognition and shock. She was wearing the same expression she'd worn 18 months ago when she'd whispered to her mother, "Well, you're not the one people came to celebrate." But tonight, I was. "My name is Sarah Elizabeth Morrison," I continued, feeling the weight of every word. "And this is the story of how I learned that sometimes, the family that throws you away is making room for the family that will choose you." The applause began before I'd even finished the sentence. But the real story began long before this moment, in a place where the sound of my own voice felt like a foreign language. Flashback 18 months earlier. The proposition, "Sarah, we need to talk." I looked up from the stack of medical bills scattered across our kitchen table like fallen leaves. Dad's heart surgery. Mom's diabetes medication. The second mortgage payment. The numbers blurred together in an endless parade of financial impossibility. My mother, Patricia Morrison, stood in the doorway wearing her serious conversation face, the same expression she'd worn when she told me I needed to drop out of nursing school to take care of Dad. The same look when she informed me that my acceptance to medical school was impractical given our family circumstances. "There's a man interested in meeting you," she said, her voice carrying that particular tone that meant the decision had already been made. "David Whitmore. He's in construction, financially stable, and he's looking for a wife." I stared at her. At 42, I had been a registered nurse for 10 years before family circumstances forced me home. I had saved lives, earned respect from colleagues, made a difference in my community. Now I was being discussed like livestock at auction. "Mother, I'm not interested in Sarah Elizabeth Morrison." The full name. That was never good. "Look around you. Look at these bills. Look at your father's condition. Look at what we're facing." She gestured at the chaos of papers. "This man can solve our problems. All of them." I thought about my old life. The 6 a.m. shifts at Presbyterian Hospital. Mrs. Henderson in room 304 who always asked for me specifically. The moment when Dr. Martinez told me I had natural instincts for emergency medicine. The letter from University of Colorado Medical School that still sat, unopened, in my desk drawer. "I barely know him," I said weakly. "You'll learn." Patricia's voice had that finality that brooked no argument. "He's coming to dinner tomorrow night. Wear the blue dress. The one that makes you look approachable." That night, I lay in my childhood bedroom, the same room I'd returned to after giving up my apartment to help with expenses, and stared at the ceiling. Through the thin walls, I could hear my parents' muffled conversation. "She'll do what's necessary," Mom was saying. "She always has. Are you sure about this?" Dad's voice, weaker since the surgery. "Robert, we're drowning. The medical bills alone. And Sarah's not getting any younger. At 42, her options are limited. At least this way, she'll be provided for." Limited options. At 42. As if my decade as a nurse, my relationships with patients and colleagues, my dreams of medical school, were just time fillers before the real business of being someone's wife. I pressed my face into the pillow and remembered the last thing my nursing supervisor had said to me. "Sarah, you have a gift. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." Too late for that. Flashback the meeting. David Whitmore arrived exactly at 7, wearing a simple button-down shirt and dark jeans that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. He was 45 tall, with gray threading through his dark hair and the kind of quiet confidence that didn't need to announce itself. "Mrs. Morrison, Mr. Morrison," he said, shaking hands with my parents. "Thank you for having me." When he turned to me, his eyes deep brown, serious, met mine directly. "Sarah, Mr. Whitmore. Dinner was a carefully orchestrated performance. Mom had prepared her company meal, a roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, and directed the conversation with the precision of a symphony conductor. Sarah was an excellent nurse, she said, as if my career was already a closed chapter. Very dedicated. Sometimes too dedicated. The subtle criticism hung in the air like smoke. What kind of nursing did you do? David asked me directly. Emergency medicine, I replied, feeling oddly defensive. Presbyterian Hospital's emergency department. That must have been intense work. It was. I loved it. The words came out with more force than I'd intended. He nodded, and something in his expression suggested he understood the past tense wasn't my choice. The conversation moved to his work, construction, he said, specializing in sustainable building practices. He spoke intelligently about environmental concerns, worker safety, community development. Not what I'd expected from someone my mother had described as simply financially stable. After dinner, he asked if I'd like to walk in the garden. The October air was crisp, and the silence between us felt less oppressive than the dinner table conversation. Your mother seems very determined, he said finally. I almost laughed. That's one word for it. And your father's recovery? Slow. Expensive. I stopped walking and looked at him directly. Mr. Whitmore, I think we both know why you're here. My family needs financial help, and you apparently need a wife. I'm not sure what else there is to discuss. He was quiet for a long moment. What would you need to feel comfortable? The question surprised me. Not what did I want, or what did my family need, but what would make me comfortable. Honestly, I'm not sure I can be comfortable with any of this. That's fair. He paused. What if we approached it differently? What if, instead of thinking about marriage as a transaction, we considered it a partnership? Two people helping each other through difficult circumstances. And what difficult circumstances are you facing, Mr. Whitmore? He smiled slightly. You'd be surprised. 3 days later, he called. Not my parents, me directly, on my cell phone. Sarah, I've been thinking about our conversation. Would you be willing to meet me for coffee? Just the two of us. No audience. I almost said no. Almost. But something in his voice, respectful, patient, genuine, and made me curious. All right. We met at a small cafe downtown. He looked different in daylight, younger somehow, less formal. I want to be completely honest with you, he said after we'd ordered. I'm not looking for a traditional marriage. I'm looking for a partner. Someone who understands that sometimes life requires unconventional solutions. Unconventional how? I believe in giving people space to be themselves. I believe in supporting each other's dreams, even if they don't look like what everyone else expects. I studied his face. That sounds too good to be true. Maybe. But what's the alternative? I thought about my parents' mounting debt. Dad's follow-up surgeries. The medical school acceptance letter still sitting in my drawer. The growing certainty that my family saw me as a financial liability disguised as a caretaker. If I agreed to this, I said slowly, what would you expect from me? Honesty. Respect. And maybe, eventually, companionship. And what would I get? The same. Plus the space to figure out what you want your life to look like. I should have asked more questions. Should have demanded specifics, contracts, timelines. Instead, I found myself saying, all right, yes, Mr. Whitmore, I'll marry you. He smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. David, if we're going to be married, you should probably call me David. The wedding. The ceremony took place at St. Mark's Lutheran Church on a gray February morning. If you could call it a ceremony. 43 people in a sanctuary that could hold 300, most of them my parents' friends who came more out of curiosity than celebration. I wore the blue dress Mom had insisted on, the one that made me look approachable with a simple bouquet of grocery store carnations. Lindsay stood as my maid of honor, her expression suggesting she was attending a funeral rather than a wedding. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, Pastor Johnson intoned, do you take David Michael Whitmore to be your lawfully wedded husband? I looked at David. He was wearing a navy suit that fit him perfectly, and his expression was calm, reassuring, kind. I do. David Michael Whitmore, do you take Sarah Elizabeth Morrison to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. The kiss was brief, appropriate, bloodless, like a contract being signed rather than a union being celebrated. At the reception, cake and punch in the church fellowship hall, I overheard my mother talking to Mrs. Henderson from her neighborhood. Well, we're just relieved someone was willing to take her, Mom said, her voice carrying that particular brand of maternal disappointment I knew so well. At 42, with no prospects. David is really doing us all a favor. Mrs. Henderson made sympathetic noises. It's hard when they wait so long to settle down. Oh, Sarah never really had the social skills for dating. Too focused on work, you know. Sometimes I think she forgot she was a woman first. Forgot she was a woman first. As if my decade of saving lives, of being the person families called when their loved ones were dying, of working 18-hour shifts during the flu pandemic, was somehow secondary to my failure to find a husband. David appeared at my elbow with a cup of punch. Ready to go? I nodded, not trusting my voice. We said our goodbyes, perfunctory hugs, promises to visit soon that everyone knew were lies, and walked to David's car. A modest Honda Civic, not the expensive truck I'd expected from someone in construction. Where are we going? I asked as we pulled away from the church. Home, he said simply. Where is home? You'll see. The drive to Colorado. The drive to Colorado took 6 hours. We talked sporadically about the weather, about music he liked classical, I preferred jazz, about books we both loved mysteries. Safe topics. Getting to know you conversation between strangers who happen to be married. David, I said as we crossed into Colorado. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why me? I mean, really. You could have married anyone. Someone younger, prettier, more available. He was quiet for so long, I thought he might not answer. Finally, do you remember what you said at the cafe? About being honest? Yes. Most people aren't. Most people want something from me. They perform, they pretend, they calculate what they think I want to hear. He glanced at me. You didn't do that. You told me exactly what you were thinking, even when it wasn't flattering. Maybe I was just rude. Maybe. Or maybe you were real. We drove through the outskirts of Denver as the sun set behind the mountains. The landscape was different from Missouri, bigger somehow, more open. Like there was room to breathe. Sarah, David said as we turned onto a winding mountain road. I need to tell you something. About my work. Okay. I wasn't entirely honest before. About what I do. My stomach tightened. What do you mean? I do work in construction. But not the way you probably think. We pulled into a driveway beside a beautiful log cabin nestled into the hillside. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over the valley, and the interior lights were warm and welcoming. David, this is beautiful. But what? I own the company, he said quietly. Whitmore Sustainable Construction. We specialize in eco-friendly residential and commercial buildings. I stared at him. You own it? My family has money, Sarah. Quite a bit of money. I chose to work in construction because I believe in building things that last, that don't hurt the environment. But I could have chosen not to work at all. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to know who you were before you knew who I was. I looked at the cabin of my new home and tried to process what he was telling me. So this is a test? You marry poor women to see if they're gold diggers? No. His voice was firm. This is me trying to find someone who sees me as a person, not a bank account. And if I had known, would it have changed your mind about marrying me? I thought about my parents' debt, my own limited options, my life that had been shrinking steadily for the past 2 years. Probably not, I admitted. Then what difference does it make? I couldn't argue with that logic. Life in the mountains, living with David was unlike anything I'd experienced. He was quiet but not withdrawn, present but not demanding. He worked from a home office most days, taking occasional trips to job sites. He cooked actual meals, not just reheated leftovers. He read voraciously. He maintained a small garden behind the house with the same care and attention most people reserve for newborns. And he gave me space. Physical space, emotional space, space to figure out who I was in this new life. The cabin had 3 bedrooms. He took the master suite. I took the guest room with the view of the mountains. We shared common areas like polite roommates, respecting each other's routines and boundaries. Sarah, he said one morning over coffee, what did you love most about nursing? I looked up from my breakfast, surprised by the question. The moments when I made a difference. When someone was scared or in pain, and I could help them feel better. Not just medically, but human. Seen. Do you miss it? Every day. He nodded thoughtfully. What would it take for you to go back? I can't. My parents need. Your parents are fine now, he said gently. Their medical bills are paid. The house payments are current. They have health insurance that will cover future expenses. I stared at him. You paid? It was part of our arrangement. But they didn't tell me. I asked them not to. I wanted you to have time to adjust before making any decisions about your future. I felt something shift inside my chest. You mean I could? You could do whatever you want, Sarah. Go back to nursing, pursue medical school, start a new career entirely, or just take time to figure it out. For the first time in 2 years, I felt like I could breathe. Rediscovering myself. I started small. Volunteer work at the local clinic, just a few hours a week. The first time I took someone's blood pressure, my hands remembered the familiar routine like muscle memory. The gentle pressure of the cuff, the sound of the pulse through the stethoscope, the way patients relaxed when they realized I knew what I was doing. Thank you, said Mrs. Garcia, an elderly woman with diabetes who reminded me of my patients back in Missouri. You have very gentle hands. Gentle hands. I'd forgotten that's what people used to say about me. David never asked about my volunteer work directly, but he'd have dinner ready when I came home, and sometimes I'd catch him smiling when I talked about the patients I'd seen. There's a boy, I told him one evening. Tommy. He's 12, and he's terrified of needles. His mom brings him in for blood draws for his leukemia treatment, and he just panics. What do you do? I talk to him about baseball. Turns out he's a Rockies fan. So I tell him stories about the players while I work, and he forgets to be scared. David nodded. You're good at that. Making people feel safe. I looked at him across the dinner table, this man who had given me a home, paid my family's debts, and asked for nothing in return, and realized that I felt safe too. The phone call. 3 months into our marriage, my phone rang at 7 a.m. on a Saturday. Sarah? My mother's voice, tight with what I'd learned to recognize as controlled panic. Mom? What's wrong? It's your father. We're at the hospital. Another episode. My blood went cold. What kind of episode? Chest pains. They think it might be another heart attack. I was out of bed and pulling on clothes before I'd even processed the decision. Which hospital? St. Joseph's in Kansas City. I'll be there in 6 hours. David appeared in the doorway as I was shoving clothes into a bag. What's happened? I explained quickly, efficiently, the way I'd learned to relay medical information in emergency situations. I'll drive you, he said immediately. You don't have to, Sarah. I'll drive you. The 6-hour drive passed in a blur of worry and highway. David didn't try to fill the silence with empty reassurances. He just drove, steady and competent, while I stared out the window and thought about everything I should have said to Dad but hadn't. The hospital, St. Joseph's emergency department, looked exactly like Presbyterian, had the same antiseptic smell, the same controlled chaos, the same expression of barely contained anxiety on the faces of waiting families. I found Mom and Lindsay in the family conference room. Lindsay looked up when I walked in, her expression shifting from relief to something harder to define. Sarah, you came. Of course I came. We weren't sure. Since you've been busy with your new life. I ignored the barb. How is he? Stable, Mom said, her voice carefully controlled. It wasn't another heart attack. The doctors think it was stress-related chest pain, but they want to keep him for observation. Relief flooded through me. Can I see him? Family only, Lindsay said automatically, then caught herself. I mean, your family, of course. But, Lindsay, Mom's voice carried a warning. I looked between them, suddenly understanding. You didn't expect me to come. It's not that, Mom said quickly. It's just, you have a new husband now, new responsibilities. We didn't want to burden you. Burden. The same word they'd used when they'd made it clear I was expected to sacrifice my career to take care of them. Now, suddenly, I was too important to be burdened. I need to see him, I said firmly. Dad looked smaller in the hospital bed, dwarfed by the machines and monitors. But his color was good, and his breathing was steady. Sarah. His voice was weak but warm. You didn't have to come all this way. Dad, don't be ridiculous. Of course I came. He squeezed my hand. How's married life treating you? It's good. And surprisingly, it was true. David's a good man. I'm glad. You deserve someone who takes care of you for a change. I studied his face. Dad, are you happy? With the way things worked out, he was quiet for a long moment. I'm glad you're not worried about money anymore. I'm glad you have someone to lean on. But Sarah, I hope you know that what you gave up for us, all those years, it mattered. You mattered. I felt tears threatening. I know, Dad. Do you? Because sometimes I think we got so used to you taking care of us that we forgot to take care of you. The revelation, Dad was discharged the next day with instructions for rest and stress management. As we prepared to leave, I found myself in the family bathroom, staring at my reflection in the harsh fluorescent lighting. I looked different, healthier, somehow. The constant tension I carried in my shoulders for years had eased. My skin looked clearer. I'd gained a little weight, good weight, not stress weight. David had done this. Not just financially, but by giving me space to exist without constantly anticipating the next crisis, the next demand, the next sacrifice required. When I came out, Lindsay was waiting in the hallway. Sarah, can we talk? We found a quiet corner near the hospital gift shop. I owe you an apology, Lindsay said abruptly. I blinked, surprised. For what? For how we treated you. Before the wedding, and, well, for a long time before that. Lindsay, no. Let me say this. I've been thinking about it since Dad got sick. About how you gave up medical school to take care of them. About how you put your life on hold, over and over, and we just expected it. I didn't know what to say. I was jealous, she continued, of how much they needed you. Mom and Dad, they always talked about you like you were some kind of saint, sacrificing everything for the family. And I was off in Denver, living my own life, feeling guilty but not guilty enough to come home and help. You had your own career, your own family. So did you. Or you could have. Lindsay's voice was quiet. Sarah, do you know why Mom was so eager to marry you off to David? Because the family needed money. Partly. But also because she felt guilty. About the medical school thing, about making you come home, about all of it. She thought if she could find someone to take care of you, it would balance the scales somehow. I stared at her. She told you this? Not directly. But I figured it out. Mom doesn't do guilt well. She'd rather fix things than acknowledge them. We stood in silence for a moment, watching hospital staff and visitors move past us. Are you happy? Lindsay asked finally. With David, I mean. I thought about it. I think I'm learning how to be good. You deserve that. The decision, the drive back to Colorado gave me time to think. About my parents, about Lindsay, about the strange turn my life had taken. About David, who had asked for so little and given so much. David, I said as we crossed the Colorado state line, can I ask you something personal? Shoot. Why haven't you ever been married before? I mean, you're successful, you're kind, you're attractive. I felt myself blush. There must have been opportunities. He was quiet for a mile or two. There were, but everyone I dated seemed to be auditioning for the role of wife of successful businessman. They'd change their opinions to match mine, agree with everything I said, perform whatever version of themselves they thought I wanted. That sounds exhausting. It was. And lonely. And you don't think I'm performing? He smiled. Sarah, you argued with me about the thermostat setting yesterday. You told me my coffee was too strong. You rearranged my bookshelf without asking. If you're performing, you're very bad at it. I laughed. Sorry about the bookshelf. Don't be. It needed organizing. We drove in comfortable silence for a while. David, I said eventually, what would you think if I applied to medical school? He glanced at me surprised. I'd think it was about time. Really? Sarah, you light up when you talk about medicine. When you come home from the clinic, you're radiant. Why wouldn't I want you to pursue something that makes you happy? Because I'm 42. Because it would take years. Because it would be expensive and demanding, and it's what you want. I looked out at the mountains rising ahead of us. Yeah, it's what I want. Then we'll figure out how to make it happen. The application, applying to medical school at 42 felt like claiming space I wasn't sure I was allowed to occupy. The application process was daunting: MCAT scores, transcripts, personal statements, interviews. David helped however he could, driving me to testing centers, proofreading essays, listening to me practice interview answers. Why medicine? He asked during one of our practice sessions. Because every time I help someone feel better, feel safer, feel seen, I remember who I am. Not daughter, not wife, not caregiver. Just Sarah, the person who can make a difference. That's good. Say that. The University of Colorado acceptance letter arrived on a Tuesday in March. I stared at it for 10 minutes before opening it, afraid of disappointment. Dear Ms. Morrison Whitmore, it began. I read it twice before the words sank in. Then I ran to David's office, letter in hand. I got in, I said breathlessly. I got in. He looked up from his computer, face breaking into a grin. Congratulations, Dr. Morrison Whitmore. Not yet. Someday. That night, we celebrated with champagne and takeout Chinese food. It felt like the first celebration of my adult life that was actually about me. The family dinner 6 months later, Lindsay invited us to a family dinner at her house in Denver. To celebrate Dad's recovery, she said, and to meet David properly. I was nervous as we drove to Lindsay's house in Cherry Creek. It would be the first time my family had seen David and me together as a couple. The first time they'd see how our marriage had evolved. Lindsay's house was everything I'd expected: elegant, expensive, carefully curated. She greeted us at the door wearing the kind of casual outfit that probably cost more than my monthly food budget. David. She hugged him warmly. Finally, we meet the man who stole our Sarah. I prefer to think I rescued her, David said with a smile. Over dinner, professionally catered, of course, the conversation was surprisingly easy. David charmed my parents with stories about sustainable construction, asked intelligent questions about Lindsay's law practice, complimented the food. So David, Mom said over dessert, what are your plans for Sarah? I felt David tense slightly beside me. I'm sorry. Well, you've been married almost a year now. Are you thinking about children? A house of your own? Mom, I started. We have a house, David said evenly. As for children, that's something Sarah and I will decide together, when and if we're ready. Of course, but at Sarah's age, Patricia. Dad's voice was quiet but firm. That's enough. An uncomfortable silence settled over the table. Actually, I said, surprising myself, David and I have some news. Everyone looked at me expectantly. I've been accepted to medical school. University of Colorado. I start in the fall. The silence that followed was deafening. Medical school? Mom's voice was faint. At 42, Lindsay's eyebrows were somewhere near her hairline. But Sarah, Mom said, you're married now. You have responsibilities. I'm going to be a doctor, I said firmly. It's something I've always wanted, and David is supportive. Completely supportive, David added. Mom looked between us as if we'd announced plans to join the circus. But the time commitment, the stress, the cost. We can handle it, I said. Sarah, be realistic. You're not 22 anymore. Maybe it's time to focus on building a family instead of chasing career fantasies. Career fantasies. As if a decade of nursing experience and acceptance to medical school were delusions. Mom, Lindsay said quietly, maybe we should be proud of Sarah for going after what she wants. Mom turned to her in surprise. Lindsay? I mean it. How many people our age get a second chance at their dreams? Sarah's been taking care of everyone else for years. Maybe it's time someone took care of her. I looked at my sister in amazement. The sister who had always been the golden child, the success story, the one who got to live her own life while I sacrificed mine. Thank you, I said softly. She smiled. Don't thank me yet. Wait until you're pulling all-nighters studying organic chemistry. The gala, full circle. Which brings us back to where we started. The Foundation Gala, 18 months later, where I stood on stage as the co-director of the Whitmore Foundation's new medical education scholarship program. But now you know the rest of the story. How David had revealed, gradually, that his family's wealth came from Whitmore Enterprises hotels, construction, real estate development across the western United States. How his mother, Eleanor Whitmore, had initially been skeptical of our marriage but had gradually come to respect my background in healthcare. How David and I had worked together to develop a scholarship program for non-traditional medical students, people like me who had taken detours, faced obstacles, started later than conventional wisdom dictated. The Morrison Whitmore Scholarship, I continued from the podium, will provide full funding for 10 students each year who are pursuing medical careers after the age of 35. Because it's never too late to answer the call to heal. The applause was thunderous. In the audience, I could see David beaming with pride. Eleanor Whitmore, dignified in navy blue, was actually smiling. And in the third row, Lindsay was clapping with tears in her eyes. After the presentation, as guests mingled and congratulated us, Lindsay approached me. Sarah, that was incredible. Thank you. I have something to tell you. Mom and Dad are here. I looked around, scanning the crowd. Where? By the silent auction tables. They asked me to arrange an invitation. My heart started beating faster. They're here? They wanted to see you. To hear you speak. I found them near the back of the room, looking uncomfortable in their best clothes but proud. Genuinely proud. Sarah, Dad said, enveloping me in a hug. We are so proud of you. We should have been saying that years ago, Mom added quietly. I'm sorry it took us so long. I looked at my parents, older, smaller somehow, but here. They had driven 6 hours to watch me receive recognition for work they were just beginning to understand. Thank you for coming, I said. Wouldn't miss it, Dad replied. Our daughter, the doctor. Medical student, I corrected automatically. Doctor, Mom said firmly. You're going to be a doctor. That's what matters. We talked for a few more minutes, carefully, politely, but genuinely. The years of resentment and misunderstanding couldn't be erased in one evening, but this felt like a beginning. As they prepared to leave, Mom pulled me aside. Sarah, I need to say something. What we did to you, making you give up your dreams, your career, your life, it wasn't fair. I told myself we needed you. That family came first, but really, I was scared. Scared of managing on our own. Scared of admitting we couldn't handle everything ourselves. I felt tears threatening. Mom, let me finish. You were always the strong one, the capable one. It was easier to lean on you than to figure out how to stand up ourselves. And when David came along, I thought if I could find someone to take care of you the way you'd taken care of us, it would make up for what we'd taken from you. It wasn't a transaction, Mom, no. And that's what I'm learning. David didn't marry you to solve our problems or yours. He married you because he saw who you really are. And tonight, watching you up there, I finally see it too. I hugged her then, really hugged her, for the first time in years. I love you, Mom. I love you too, sweetheart. And I'm sorry it took me so long to show it properly. 6 months later, medical school. The University of Colorado Medical School was everything I dreamed it would be and nothing like I'd expected. At 43, I was older than most of my classmates by 20 years, but I wasn't alone. There were others like me, a former teacher, a retired military medic, a woman who'd raised 4 children before deciding to pursue medicine. We called ourselves the second chance students, and we studied together with the intensity of people who knew exactly how precious the opportunity was. Morrison Whitmore, can you tell us about the pathophysiology of myocardial infarction? I stood up in the packed lecture hall, aware that 200 pairs of eyes were on me. Myocardial infarction occurs when blood flow to a portion of the heart muscle is blocked, typically by a thrombotic occlusion of a coronary artery. As I spoke, I thought about Dad's chest pains, about all the patients I'd comforted in emergency rooms, about the knowledge I was gaining that would help me save lives more effectively than ever before. This was where I belonged. The study group. My study group met 3 times a week in the medical library. There was Jessica, 25 and brilliant, Marcus, 27 and cocky but good-hearted, and Tom, 41 like me, a former engineer. Sarah, Jessica said during one of our late-night cramming sessions, "Can I ask you something personal?" "Shoot." "How do you do it? Balance everything? I mean, you're married, you have family obligations, and you're keeping up with all of us kids." I laughed. "Some days I'm not sure I am keeping up." "Are you kidding? You have the highest scores in our anatomy class." "Because I've been working with bodies for 10 years. I have an advantage." "It's more than that," Marcus chimed in. "You see the big picture. Like, when Dr. Patterson was explaining cardiac cycles, you connected it to patient care immediately. The rest of us are just memorizing." Tom nodded. "That's experience. It's what we older students bring context." Plus, Jessica added, "Your husband is amazing. When he came to the student spouses event, he spent the whole time asking about our research projects and telling everyone how proud he was of you." I smiled, thinking about David. He had been nothing but supportive, taking over household responsibilities without complaint, listening to me practice presentations, celebrating my successes, and comforting me through failures. "I'm lucky," I said simply. "We all are," Tom replied, "to be here, doing this. Second chances don't come around often." The call. I was in the middle of studying for my immunology exam when my phone rang. Lindsay's number. "Sarah, I'm sorry to bother you during finals. What's wrong?" I could hear it in her voice immediately. "It's Mom. She's in the hospital. They think it's her heart." My textbook slid off my lap as I stood up. "What hospital?" "Presbyterian. Where you used to work. I'll be there in 4 hours." This time, I drove myself. David had offered to come, but I needed to do this alone. Needed to walk back into the hospital where I'd once worked as a nurse, now as a medical student, to face whatever was waiting for my family. Return to Presbyterian. Walking into Presbyterian Hospital felt like stepping back in time. The same smells, the same sounds, the same controlled chaos I remembered. But I wasn't the same person who had left here 3 years ago. "Sarah Morrison?" I turned to see Dr. Martinez, my former supervisor from the emergency department. "Dr. Martinez, it's Sarah Morrison Whitmore now. I heard you were in medical school. How's it going?" "Better than I dared hope." "I'm not surprised. You always had the instincts. Listen, I'm sorry about your mother. Dr. Chen is taking excellent care of her." I found my family in the cardiac ICU waiting room. Dad looked older, more fragile. Lindsay stood when she saw me. "How is she?" "Stable. It was a mild heart attack, but at her age. They want to do a catheterization tomorrow to check for blockages." I hugged Dad, feeling how small he'd become. "I'm here now." "Sarah," he said quietly, "your mother asked for you specifically. She's been different since the gala. More thoughtful. I think seeing you succeed, really succeed, changed something for her." I spent the next 3 days at the hospital, splitting time between Mom's bedside and my study materials. My classmates sent notes and care packages. David drove down for the weekend, bringing real food and emotional support. Mom recovered well from the procedure, 2 stents to open blocked arteries, and was discharged after a week. "Sarah," she said as I helped her into Dad's car, "I want you to know something. When I was lying in that hospital bed, scared and hurting, I kept thinking about all the families you must have helped when you worked here. All the people who were as frightened as I was, who found comfort because of you. Mom, I'm proud of you. Not just for medical school, not just for the scholarship program. I'm proud of who you are. The person who chooses to help, to heal, to make things better. I should have told you that years ago. I squeezed her hand. You're telling me now. That's what matters. Graduation day, 4 years later, I walked across the stage at CU Medical School's graduation ceremony wearing my white coat and hood, with David, my parents, Lindsay, and even Eleanor Whitmore cheering from the audience. Dr. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison Whitmore, the dean announced, and I felt a surge of joy so pure it took my breath away. In the audience, David was on his feet applauding. Dad was crying openly. Mom was beaming with the kind of unqualified pride I'd wanted from her my entire life. After the ceremony, we gathered for pictures on the medical school steps. So what's next, Dr. Morrison Whitmore? Lindsay asked. Residency. Emergency medicine at Denver General. Back where you started, David said, smiling. Not back. Forward. Everything I learned as a nurse, everything I've learned as a student, everything I've learned about myself, it all comes together now. That evening, at the graduation party David and Eleanor had hosted at their family's Denver estate, I found a quiet moment to step outside and look up at the mountains. Regrets? David's voice came from behind me. I turned to find my husband and my partner, my supporter, my friend watching me with that same gentle expression he'd worn the first night we met. None, I said truthfully. Well, maybe one. What's that? I wish I could go back and tell that scared woman in the blue dress that everything was going to work out better than she could possibly imagine. David stepped closer, taking my hand. You know what I wish? What? I wish I could go back and tell that lonely man that he was about to meet someone who would show him what a real partnership looks like. We stood together in comfortable silence, looking out at the mountains that had become home. David, I said eventually, there's something I need to tell you. He looked at me with concern. What is it? I love you. Really love you. Not because you saved me or supported me or gave me opportunities. I love you because of who you are. The man who saw something valuable in a broken woman and gave her space to heal. The man who never asked me to be smaller to make him feel bigger. He smiled then, the slow, genuine smile I'd learned to treasure. I love you too, Sarah. I have for years. I was just waiting for you to be ready to hear it. I'm ready now. Good, he said, kissing me softly. Because I plan to keep telling you for the next 40 years. Epilogue, 5 years later, Dr. Sarah Morrison Whitmore, attending physician in emergency medicine at Denver General Hospital, finished her shift at 7 a.m. and walked to her car through the early morning sunshine. In her pocket, her phone buzzed with a text message. David, coffee's ready when you get home. Proud of you, as always. She smiled, thinking about the night shift she'd just completed. 3 heart attacks successfully treated, 2 trauma cases stabilized, 1 baby delivered in the ambulance bay when labor progressed too quickly to make it upstairs. A good night. At 48, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The Morrison Whitmore Scholarship Program had grown to support 50 students annually. Lindsay had joined the foundation board and was spearheading legal aid programs for healthcare workers. Mom and Dad had moved to Colorado to be closer to family, and Mom volunteered at the clinic where Sarah had first rediscovered her calling. As she drove home through the mountains, Sarah thought about the woman she'd been 5 years ago, afraid, diminished, convinced that her best years were behind her. That woman couldn't have imagined this life. Meaningful work, genuine love, family relationships rebuilt on foundations of respect rather than obligation. She pulled into the driveway of the house she and David had built together, not grand like Eleanor's estate, but perfect for them, with David's sustainable materials and Sarah's insistence on a garden where she could grow vegetables and flowers with equal care. David was waiting on the porch with coffee, still in his pajamas, hair rumpled from sleep. After 8 years of marriage, he was more handsome to her than ever. How was your night, Dr. Morrison Whitmore? Exhausting. Exhilarating. Exactly right. Good. Come inside. I made pancakes. You didn't have to, Sarah, he said, stopping her with a gentle hand on her arm. After 8 years, you should know by now that I don't do anything I don't want to do. I wanted to make you pancakes. She smiled, following him inside. In that case, I accept your pancakes. Good. Because I have news. What kind of news? The kind that involves a phone call from the MacArthur Foundation and the words, Genius Grant nominee. Sarah stared at him. What? Someone nominated you for a MacArthur Fellowship. For your work developing emergency medicine protocols for rural hospitals. David, that's impossible. Apparently not. The interview is next month. She sank into her kitchen chair, overwhelmed. I can't believe this. I can. Sarah, you've spent the last 5 years revolutionizing emergency care in underserved communities. You've trained rural paramedics, developed telemedicine protocols, and saved countless lives. You deserve every recognition you get. She looked at her husband, this man who had seen her potential before she'd seen it herself, who had given her the space and support to become the person she was meant to be. You know what the best part is? She said. What? 5 years ago, I thought my life was over. I thought I was too old, too scared, too damaged to start again. And now? And now? Now I know that it's never too late to become who you're supposed to be. David smiled, pouring syrup over her pancakes. Dara Morrison Whitmore, I think that might be the wisest thing you've ever said. Give me time. I'm just getting started. Outside, the Colorado sun climbed higher over the mountains, illuminating another day full of possibilities. And Sarah Elizabeth Morrison Whitmore, emergency physician, scholarship founder, beloved wife, and living proof that second chances can lead to first-rate lives, sat down to breakfast with the man who had helped her remember who she was and discover who she could become. The story that had begun with a forced marriage and a faded blue dress had become something neither of them could have imagined. A love story, a success story, and most importantly, a story about the courage to claim the life you deserve, even when everyone tells you it's too late to start again. Some endings are really beginnings. Some defeats are victories in disguise. And sometimes, the person who saves you is the one who teaches you how to save yourself.